Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Damian, Sian, and I have 20 minutes to give you 20 slides on the topic of Adobe InDesign as the authoring tool for accessible PDFs, some limitations of that paradigm, and hopefully some possibilities for you too. My agenda for today is to review specifically about an efficient workflow using Adobe InDesign to accessible PDF and some of the challenges that we have in efficiency. I'll be talking about putting alternative text on URLs. I'll be talking about expansion text on acronyms and abbreviations, tagging complex tables, formatting form inputs for interactive forms, handling data visualizations and math equations, and wrapping it up and giving time for Q&A. If I don't have the time allotted, I'm going to stop myself, and we might not get to all these topics. As I was introduced as a representative from Axaio, I do have a day job. I'm here on their behalf. My day job is at the place you may have heard of, Princeton University. I am the Senior Web Accessibility Advisor there. PDFs are just one sliver of the work that I do as a Senior Web Accessibility Advisor at Princeton. My former background was within pharmaceutical and medical device labeling and corporate finance. So I'm not a stranger to working in highly regulated document workflows. So when accessibility came into my life, it was an easy adoption for me to take just another layer of regulatory requirements and apply them to a workflow that I'm working in. I do carry a certification from the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. It's called the CPWA, the Certified Professional in Web Accessibility. And my other distinction for today is being the only person to put their own photograph on their deck. I want to thank the PDF Association for their feedback to let me know that. So we've heard some different and differing definitions of web accessibility today, and I have one more for you. I count a PDF to be accessible when it conforms to the 38 normative success criteria of the WCAG 2.0 AA. I also count a PDF to be accessible when it conforms to the guidance provided in the PDF UA specification and could pass muster with the Matterhorn protocol. And I also will specify that I consider a document to be accessible when it's accessible to people with print disability and it's been optimized for their assistive technology. I would count that as people with no vision or low vision and their assistive technologies. Accessibility is not specifically captured by those two groups, but the majority of the work that we do with tagging our PDFs is for the benefit of those groups, and the severity of the barrier to access is also the greatest, in my opinion, for those two groups. So let's talk about efficiency and the purpose of why I'm here to speak with you. I would argue that editing a PDF after it's been exported is not an efficient use of time. I prefer, thank you, I'm getting some applause. I would say that the work that we have to do is within the native authoring tool. I've chosen to speak about Adobe InDesign today, but a lot of what I'm saying would apply to Microsoft Word or any other authoring tool. And I'm not here to harp on InDesign or any authoring tool. I'm here to point out some areas where we're missing the mark to further the adaptation, the adoption of accessibility in the industry, okay? And to get us further along, I'd like more control over the PDF within the authoring tool rather than having to wait till I make the PDF to make those edits. I have some things that I'll show you some workarounds that I've employed and also some kind of hopes for the future. There might be developers here today that could say, oh, we can actually solve that problem today with a plugin or something like that. So let's get started. The first thing I'll bring up is putting alternative text on URLs. The problem is Adobe can't do that. Adobe InDesign cannot take a piece of text content and apply a piece of metadata on there. And why is that a big deal? Who would benefit from being able to do that? What's the impact? A screen reader user, so someone who's non-sighted relying on a screen reader like JAWS or NVDA, will pull up a list of links to navigate through a document. It's a very common navigation technique, both in PDF and in web. If we take the full string URL and put that up into that list of links, it becomes really unusable. So putting the alternative text on that makes the experience far better. Right now, the only way that I can do that is after the document has been exported to PDF. And that's a one-way trip with a manual process. So I have 2 links on my screen at the moment. The first one is what I would prefer everyone in the world would do every time, but we don't always have the option, would be to put a plain text description of what the URL is intended, what is its purpose in the document. The second is the full string, https://www. Now, there are times in your workflow where you're mandated to put an electronic PDF online that is a duplication of the print document that went out, like an SEC requirement for a prospectus document that goes to a shareholder, for example, would need that full path of the URL in the print document, and I have to have a 1-to-1 ratio in the document that goes online. So our solution is to grab that text in Acrobat, go to the alternative text properties, and put in something meaningful. And this is what it would sound like. And I'm going to cross my fingers so there's no presentation effect. That I click this button, you're going to hear a screen reader.
Link Matterhorn Protocol PDF.
So that was the NVDA screen reader. How many people, it's the first time you've heard a synthesized voice speak through like a screen reader before? So a number of people, most people have heard it then. Okay, great. So what it said was link Matterhorn protocol. So it gave a plain text description after announcing the semantic element of link in the document. So that's the intended behavior. The benefit is for the non-sighted user with a screen reader. To achieve this today, I can only do a post-export. A similar problem, and I know at the beginning I specified that I was going to talk about WCAG 2.0 AA. This is a WCAG 2.0 AAA, so it's not mandated that if you're trying to achieve AA conformance that you do this, but I do think it's a better experience, and if there was a way that I could do it in InDesign, I would do it more often. So I cannot put expansion text onto acronyms and abbreviations. I can give you a quick anecdote. Working in corporate finance, we had a product for defined benefits, okay? And it was product name DB. That was how it was spelled. And when I presented this content to the product owners, I let the screen reader read DB. Anyone want to guess what the screen reader read aloud? Database. Okay, it wasn't database. It was a great guess. It was decibel. Okay, so the screen reader tried to give a better experience, and the product owner was mortified. No, why did it do that? What can we do? So we had to go through and manually add expansion text all throughout the PDF. Now, there are tools that will help automate that process. I won't mention them in the educational setting, but it's still a manual one-way trip. And I'm just going to let the screen reader do the talking here.
ADA can be pronounced ADA or Ada sounding like Ada Lovelace. VIP can be pronounced VIP or VIP sounding like lib.
So the preferred method or speech output would be the phonetic kind of spelling or pronunciation of ADA. Okay. If I want that to occur in the PDF document, I have to manually interfere with it post-export right now. You can imagine if you have a document that's riddled with references to an acronym, which I mean, I know I have that in my documents. It's a lot of work. Even if you have an automated tool in the PDF, it's still, to me, not efficient. Complex tables. So InDesign right now can put a table heading on the column, on one column and make a TH for one column. If you have something like, oh, this is nice I have this here actually, our agenda for today, what we have is a complex table, right? So this is one table set in Adobe InDesign. I have header, 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 okay? So if I'm in a data cell and I need to understand what headers are associated with that data cell, I cannot do that in Adobe InDesign today. I have to bring it out to the PDF and either manually interfere with that or use automated tools. I'll be demonstrating a piece today that I use a plugin for Adobe InDesign to do all that work within the native authoring tool without having to go out to the Acrobat. And let's take a If you were wondering where I got this weird table, this is from the World Wide Web Consortium's tutorial on creating complex table tagging. So that's not my table.
Row 1 example 1 limited. Contact row 2 James Phillips. Position row 3 sales director. Row 4 example 3 limited. Contact row 5 Suzette Jones. Position row 6 sales officer.
So each table data cell called out what the appropriate header was. The screen reader did that for the non-sighted user. Without that kind of detailed work, that's impossible for the screen reader to have the understanding of the correlation from the data cell to its header in the complex table like that. And it's done through cell ID, so it's an attribute within the tag. So I have a TH tag, I have an ID of blank. I have a data cell, I have an ID attribute of blank, and header is listed as those headers. So it could be a very complicated process to do manually using a touch-up reading order tool or something like that. Formatting form inputs. This doesn't have a direct tie to accessibility. It does have a very direct tie to making accessible interactive PDFs. So InDesign does not allow for unique formatting of form inputs, such as comb formatting or adding JavaScript validation directly within Adobe InDesign. So I'm forced to make an interactive PDF that's very accessible. I bring it over to PDF to work it in the Acrobat file, and I have all these really rich controls of each input. So I can say comb formatting, I put JavaScript on there, I can control the font, the color, and everything else. But I can't do that in InDesign, so I have to do it after the export. If I have a form with hundreds of inputs in it, it's a non-starter. So I added this to this presentation because I feel like it's hindering the adoption of PDF accessibility. In this sample, I can show you that the form input that I have here is for zip code. You can get a hint of the affordance that's here. That's a comb, so it looks like a traditional comb with the prongs sticking up. And as I type into it, it will separate out all the numbers into nice little boxes. And I've also put a JavaScript application validation here to not allow alpha characters in here. Right? So if I start typing, right, that would be formatted nicely, and if I don't fill it out correctly, I get the JavaScript error. Okay, so the challenge here is that I would have to do that manual transformation on every single one of those form inputs every time I made a PDF from Adobe InDesign, and it's just an impossibility. So using a plugin, I was able to put all that data into the InDesign file and render the PDF and have it come out over without doing any work in the PDF. So the next thing I want to talk about are data visualizations. So this problem is by far not unique to Adobe InDesign, and it's not unique to even PDF. When we put dense alternative text to describe a data visualization, we are creating a compliance solution to success criteria 1.1.1, but we're not creating a very good user experience. Alternative text lacks the ability to navigate the content. It's just read aloud as a string of information. So there are no semantic cues in there. There's no navigation ability. So the impact on efficiency can be that we have to come up with these kind of workarounds that I'm going to demonstrate to you. So this bar chart was, I lifted it from an online source that has a cool tool that will allow you to deconstruct a data visualization back to its tabular format and also present it in a sonified, so like playing musical tones to describe the X and Y axes and stuff like this. Okay, so this, if I let the screen reader go, it's just going to start reading this just very, very dense verbal.
Graphic histogram bar chart showing horsepower in 12 data points. X-axis. Label is horsepower. Ranges. Graphic from 60 to 500. Type is continuous. Scale is linear. Y-axis. Label is percent. Range is from 0.2. Graphic to 26.9. Type is continuous.
So you'll notice it kept saying graphic. That was me on my keyboard using the down arrow to retrieve more and more information that was put into the alternative text field. The screen reader will naturally stop reading after about 140 characters with spaces. So you get like a tweet to get that first description. So that would be a compliance solution, but I would say that that's not a very usable compliance solution. So this one looks about the same. But what I've done is I've hidden the data table that made this graphic. And that's what will be presented to the non-sighted user with a screen reader. So, and if I break down the fourth wall and go into the document reflow. So anyone here ever use a document reflow on your PDFs? If you hit Command 4, Control 4 on a PC, it brings up a different view. So all the accessibility professionals are saying, yes, we have. So this is how a lot of people would be viewing your PDF. So I'm in 600% right now. Okay? So what you're seeing is a data table that made up the visualization. So I deconstructed the data viz back to its tabular format, presented that in the tags tree, and now the non-sighted user and the low-sighted user get a better experience here. And what would be read aloud by the screen reader would be the table. So I'm not sure where I am with time, but I'll just go to the next example. Here I've done the same thing. I've kind of hidden the data table, but presented it in the tags tree. And what I've done is I've created a toggle switch that will present the data table and then go back to the visualization as a user preference. I've done this in Adobe InDesign using the show hide buttons. Now the problem here is that if I go to try the reflow, I get this error message saying, cannot reflow this page because it contains interactive annotations. So that's the limit of that solution. The next thing I'll go over is math equations. So currently InDesign has no means to create math equations that are visually and semantically accurate. Okay, in the web world, we use MathML or LaTeX, L-A-T-E-X, to create semantically accurate math equations that interact with a screen reader correctly. Putting your math formula into a tag called formula does not interact with the screen reader in the way that you might think it would. It does not read, this is a math formula. It has no semantic understanding with the screen reader. So there is really no way to get a math equation into InDesign today except to use a third-party plugin or just place the graphic of the math. So that is what I did in this piece. I'm going to go ahead and jump to
graphic math equation, fraction minus b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a.
So this is an image of text. It is a vector image of text, which I'll give it that credit. So it's better than nothing, but it's still not as good as we could get. I do have a link here. There's no web connection here, but there's some research out of Australia where someone has used LaTeX math composition software to create the MathML in the tags tree and then use the expansion tag on each individual node of text to create the best experience that I've found so far. So, to my closing remarks. So editing PDFs for accessibility post-export definitely creates wasteful one-way trips. And I think it's hindering the adoption of accessibility in the industry. Without third-party plugins, I would be personally pretty lost within what I'm doing in my practice. I would love for Adobe and for all people that make these applications to give us more control over the content that we create so we can better meet these standards and create a usable solution. Am I within my time? Excellent. I have time for questions. Oh, you both did at the exact same time.
You talk a lot about the issues with Adobe InDesign, and Hi, I have a question regarding footnotes and endnotes inside the tables. Have you had a chance to figure that out, or you still have to trick it? If you have a footnote inside a table, InDesign is not going to export it as. So what's your workaround with that issue?
I have never put a footnote inside of a table. I am so sorry. I've used footnotes, and what I don't like about the footnotes is also the linking kind of creates a one-way trip as well. So I link from the footnote, and I get to the footnote text, but I can't get back to my place. In some kind of niche and kind of boutique documents, I will put a link back to an anchor within that text, so it just put onto like a space next to it. So I have curated that experience manually, but again, it's completely post-export.
I'm just curious what type of documents that you've been designing with InDesign. Are they static, like user manuals, instruction guides, or things like that? Or are you using InDesign for creating dynamic documents where data is being fed into them in like a production environment?
So I don't use InDesign to do the dynamic documents at all, but I have worked in workflows where it was required using different tools. So a user would put in basically their risk profile acceptance for retirement, and a specific document would come out to them. I can talk to you afterward about what tool was used to accomplish that. In my InDesign experience, mostly marketing documents, syllabus, interactive forms, registration forms. Thank you. Any other questions? Pull it? Okay, thank you.